Hello. Don't know what I want to talk about. I guess I'll just talk shit about today and shit. Um, Good day. Saw a mate, hey Obo, and yeah, had like what I'd call like an intellectual discussion or just something which was about personal stuff and the world and life and shit. I don't know how to word it. Yeah, good conversation. Quite interesting that, and I've known it for a while, but like even though I guess I'm introverted, you can gain a lot of. I feel like a lot of energy. Feel very energetic and alive when I'm having like a good, like quite deep, discussion. A discussion with depth. It energizes me, even if it's, I guess, in something of a crowded area. So yeah, what do I want to talk about? Me and my mate today were talking about how to, well, I kind of brought it up about because it's something that I've been thinking about recently, kind of what the essence is of what the essence is of the character trait, the characteristic that enables like development and being able to see reality, and seeing reality. By that I mean the example I used today was like cold approaching. If you could see reality for what it was to its full extent, then you would have no issue cold approaching, because the anxiety of cold approach really comes from biologically, the fear of being not exempt from the tribe, not excluded from the tribe, but having no mating potential. Because when you're in a tribe, there are only X amount of women, say 6 women, and I don't know 8 men. You get rejected by 1 woman, then you've whatever the percentage is of that, like 18-17%. That's you your biological imperative of producing offspring has just been shot down by 17-18%. That's big, and also maybe a bit more, maybe 20%, because maybe 25%, because that woman can then go, hey, what Shaney did, fucking that retard try hitting on me, what a knob, what a virgin, and then all the other women are like, oh, what a twat, and she'll go, come here, Chad, come and drill me, fuck Shaney, virgin. So the chances of you reproducing can be just shot completely thereafter. So that's the anxiety which is essentially imbued in our DNA, embedded within our DNA. But it's irrational now. So if you could see reality for what it is in the present, you'd realise, well, I've never seen that girl before, probably will never see her again, so what's stopping me? Even if I'm in a little village, well, I've got money, I can move, I can get a fucking £10 flight to Mallorca and just fuck some birds there. You know what I'm saying? It's not like it was millennia upon millennia ago. So, what is this trait that enables sort of a 4 minutes? Jesus, time flies, right? What is this character trait? I think one of the things is humility. I think self-awareness or mindfulness, which is just awareness, I think that is absolutely one of the prominent, maybe corollaries. That's not the right word. One of the corollary would be right in some context, but one of the subcomponents to this trait I'm trying to, latch onto. It might be humility, it might be part of it. Open-mindedness, which I think is conscientiousness, like the big 5. I think conscientiousness is part of the big 5, and I think that is open-mindedness. Maybe, might be wrong, but yeah. So I think essentially it's genetic, partly, to some extent, some minor extent, but I think greatly it's up to us to cultivate this sort of awareness. And Elliot said to me today that I kind of instilled into him this, whatever you want to call it, seed of understanding in regard to, you know, intersexual dynamics. And I garnered that knowledge through the red pill and reading and then acting and then observing the real life results, right? And yeah, it's a difficult one, because I think for me it really is, it does come down to reading, and meditation helps me in the sense that I am more aware of my mind state throughout the day, and I'm aware of myself and the other person and the environment when I'm within an interaction, right? But I'd have to say, really, it has been the reading and then the application of what I've read in, you know, for like generally non-fiction books, that has enabled me to develop and grow. But then again, some people can read something and treat it as like biblical, treat it as like some kind of canonical text, which is absolutely imperative to their lives thereafter reading it. And I think that's naive, generally, because, you know, this is I guess what I'm coming to. It's having the disposition, the proclivity to think, to process what you read, and that seems to be quite rare, you know, which is quite interesting. I think a lot of people will read and just take what they read as fact, or they'll read it and it'll go in through this ear and out through that ear. Like, for example, I'm trying to think, find a book and give an example, and I can't pause on YouTube record live. I guess Elliot was asking me today about that live like bookshelf thing, so I'll have to awkwardly show you without being able to see. So there are some books, and then there's some books, and then it goes down to the end, if you can see. Let's take this, my favourite book, one of my favourite books. So this is Schopenhauer's Essays and Aphorisms, which I highly recommend reading, and that is the book, Elliot, I advised you today. Like, for example, the bit on women, let's just find a bit I underlined. Right, yeah. The result of whatever, I don't know. The result is that much reading robs the mind of all elasticity, as the continual pressure of a weight does a spring, and that the surest way of never having any thoughts of your own is to pick up a book every time you have a free moment. Okay, this probably fucking helped me, to be honest. This book is unbelievable. Absolutely fucking unbelievable. Okay, I could go through this for hours. This is actually fantastic. Okay, yeah, it's too much. It's fantastic. It's full of amazing shit. So yeah, maybe philosophy is one of the things that has helped me have this open-mindedness. And, you know, the famous quote by Socrates, and I'll probably paraphrase it lest I butcher it, is something, the only thing I know is that I know nothing. That's something like that. And as Elliot was saying, as you were saying today to me about that, whatever it was, that graph, where it's like, yo, I know loads of stuff, and it's like, yo, maybe I don't know, fuck all, holy shit, I'm dumb as shit. And then you start cultivating knowledge, and you're like, yeah, okay, this is incredibly deep, there's a lot of stuff to it, but, you know, I'm starting to garner some knowledge. And that's what I think philosophy has done for me. It's like, you know, when I first read Meditations by Marcus Aurelius, it was so abstract, and I was trying to think for myself, you know, you interpret it when somebody speaks in symbols and in pure metaphor without explaining himself. You have to quite interpret it. You have to understand the context of when it was written, who was writing it, etc., and derive from yourself the meaning that he may have you may have had at the time. And from there you can, I guess, process it yourself and see how it can apply to your life. So yeah, I mean, I guess it's having that open-mindedness of reading something and not just going, this is shit, put it aside, because it's probably not shit. There's a reason you picked it up, probably because you heard about it as being an amazing book or one of the most important books in this genre or whatever. So yeah, not being ignorant, essentially, not being arrogant, being humble. Again, humility, come back to that. That's imperative, especially when you get into, I guess, philosophy, as I say. And, I mean, mainly probably for any field, but personal experience, philosophy, I get so allured by these people, because I think of, like, what they wrote. It's so complicated, but they fucking wrote that shit. And there's so much, a lot of the time, there's a lot of meaning you can derive from a single passage. So yeah, humility, open-mindedness. I guess I could call intellect as a trait, but I think that can be cultivated by, I think intellect can be, what they would call it, like provoked. It's not the right word, but it can be sparked, fired up, and then developed through reading, thinking about what you're reading, and then consciously applying it or seeing it in the world, seeing examples of it, and then going, oh yeah. And I think you can tell when people are, this is another train of thought now, you can tell when people are not very intellectual and who are not very, maybe quite arrogant, quite ignorant is probably the better word, when they have such a turbulent emotional state throughout the day, when they're completely erratic, when their emotional state is defined by external events, and completely, they have to get to the beach to feel completely at ease, or be eating a chocolate cake in front of I'm a Celebrity, whatever. Those sorts of people are powerless. Their power has been handed over to the world, to anyone other than themselves, right? They are powerless. Thus, they are easily manipulated, right? Hence, mass consumerism. Hence, shite on the media. Hence, how the herd, the mass of the population are seen as, you've seen the depiction of the puppeteer being like the government, and then controlling the puppet, which is society, which is the herd, Nietzsche's last man, or last men, people who are just unthinking. They base their actions on whims and fleeting desires. And everyone, I believe, has the capacity to get out of this state, but it's hard because man has the proclivity, the tendency to take the path of least resistance. Therefore, to get out of this state of inertia, of delusion, of subserviency, we have to suffer. I'd say be aware of the suffering, and more importantly, or as importantly, be aware that there is another option, and then start suffering differently. Start suffering not through having no power over your life and over what you go after and shit, but suffering through challenging yourself and challenging your beliefs. And by that I mean saying no when everyone else is saying yes. This is really fucking abstract. by that I mean reading a book which maybe challenges social norms and might. So, for example, it educates you on the negatives of consumerism and, you know, seeing life purely materialistically, right? And just consuming shit to feel happy. Educates you on that, and then you read something like, oh, will that car really make you happy? It's only fleeting happiness. You know, your emotional state will temporarily rise and it'll go back to that baseline. And then you go, huh. And then you reflect and you go, when I did jack off to midget porn, it felt good. And then I felt bad. And then when you went to buy that fucking packet of Doritos and you scoffed it and you're like, it felt good, but then I felt bad. And then you see the trend and you go, you know? And then you're like, yes. So I feel good for a bit, and then I go back to baseline, or maybe a bit under baseline, and then you rise again when you fucking sleep and wake up and you don't feel like a piece of shit for jacking off to, you know, Sally and Sheila tossing each other off under a table. You see what I mean? Yeah. So you've educated yourself on something which is, you know, socially, you know, non-verbalized, socially communicated without words, tacitly, as normal, as what everyone does, right? You pulled yourself away from that, and then you start seeing the benefits, so you keep it up, and then there you go, you broke the cycle, and then you continue, and then you see you have the power. You are not just predisposed to being a piece of shit. I used to think that I was absolutely destined to be fat, and then look what I did. I started going to the gym with my guy Jordan 5, sometimes 6, mainly between 4 and 6 times a week, pretty much every day after school. Walk a mile or 2 to the gym, do cardio, come home, probably eat like probably the same, but I was probably eat a bit less because I had so much time out at the gym, and I lost like, I don't know, 2 stone or something. Yeah, was it 28 pounds, 2 stone? Was it more than that? 32 pounds, something like that. And I lost a lot of weight, and I proved to myself, shit, I can do this. This is me. You know, when you get with girls in the past, I'm like, whoa, I'm getting with a fit bird. I remember when I lost my virginity. I remember just after, and I was looking at her, I was like, shit, yeah, you've proven to yourself, you knew it was possible, you've proven it to yourself. And I wasn't like, oh yeah, look at me, oh yeah, shit, I'm the shit. I wasn't like that. I was just satisfied. You know, I was fulfilled, not by the act of sex, but by the act of proving to myself. I was reconciling the what I call an anxiety gap. I was reconciling the gap between fantasy and reality, or vision and reality. You know, I was reconciling that void between what I knew I was capable of and what I was actually doing, what I was actually producing. And every time you move closer to what would be your potential, you feel fulfilled. And that's why a meaningful life is, it's not exactly happy. You're not walking around like a fucking someone out of Brave New World. You're more yourself. You are confident, and you give less of a fuck, for example, and you can tell when people aren't living authentically and they are living in silent desperation, when they are so turbulent, when their lives are dictated by anything but themselves, essentially. When people just, you know, someone going, hey, twat, shatters their world, they get really frustrated and angry, you know, or they spend all the evening complaining, like I've just experienced a bit of. Oh, how's your day? Oh, we went down to, you know, it was someone's birthday. Oh, it was really good with people. And then complaining about this, complaining about that. I'm like, yo, what? You know, I mean, something minor that happened in the day, that's their main talking point. That's the focal point in the evening when they're sharing what happened in the day. Probably a great day. Probably this small thing was just a bit of an irritation. But that just like, that's what the main focus is. Like, what? Like, bro, come on. You know? But the thing is, people see living authentically is generally, I'd say, doing what they feel like doing. Which a lot of the time is just, oh yeah, I'm going on holiday, I want to be by beach, I'm earning money, I hate my job, shit, I complain every day, shit. But when I get in the evening, get back in the evening, I got my takeaway, and I get to watch my X Factor, and this weekend we're going on piss with the girls, oh yeah, girls, yeah, ooh. And then in August we're going Ibiza, I'll get really fucked up, get really fucked up, and yeah, can't wait. Really? That's authenticity? No, no, completely disagree. That's you trying to survive, that's you trying to grasp onto anything that is being sold, you know, to you, because without it, existence is completely meaningless, and without distraction, you'd just fucking sink into limbo, and you'd suffer incredibly. That's the thing, I believe a lot of people don't understand why they might be depressed or why they might be X, Y, and Z. And obviously, I'm not saying this is a one size fits all. I'm not saying that at all. I'm just saying there's a lot of shit about Western depression rising and unhappiness levels generally increasing. I say that because I've read in book after book about that, a few books about that, and videos online. You know, you've got Jordan Peterson, he says about it a lot in his 12 Rules for Life, talks about it in his videos, in his lectures. I think it's almost like a fundamental, like an absolute truth. It's like obvious that, you know, I can't be asked to justify myself, but I'm going to assume that's pretty true. And a lot of people are like, well, why? You know, look at all this stuff we've got. I've got my car, I've got the American dream, I've got my white picket fence. I'm doing better than the Joneses next door. Why am I still inclined to cut my wrists? Because that doesn't lead to happiness. You know, and I believe meaning does. This is the kind of the beauty of existentialism. You essentially define your meaning, and it can be very daunting. And what I believe is you move toward a precipice where you can either fall into just despair and hopelessness and be like, woe is me, life is meaningless, there is no inherent value, or you can jump and grapple onto the ledge above you and, you know, start climbing up to what would probably be called self-realization. I used to think there was something a bit wrong with me, or I don't know if I thought that, but I thought that I was a bit different. You know, there are no negative or positive connotations with that, so it's not bad. I used to think I was a bit different because I realised that I never really smiled that much, and it took me a good bit to laugh. You know, Alan Watts said about how laughter is like one of the keys to life, and it's just about enjoying it and just laughing. I agree to some extent. You know, you can laugh at the absurdity of things, and you can, and sometimes I do. But generally, I'm just like, my disposition is just quite neutral and non-reactive generally. Quite calm. I can be quite chill. And I think that's kind of a product of what I mean. I've had an undercurrent of sadness or depression. I hate that word, but an undercurrent of not goodness in the past, and that's probably disposed me to being a bit more solemn But if you're going around and just you're from happy to sad to ecstatic to depressed, your emotions are just like this, and that's a product of lack of control over yourself. And I don't mean like you constantly jacking off to midget porn and eating Cadbury Supreme eggs, but I mean that, you know, your environment dictates your sense of self, your state of mind. And I've harped on long enough about that idea now, so I'm going to shut up now and upload this shit to YouTube. Adios.